We looked at the salaries that our parliamentarians are now going to be getting and compare them to what elsewhere in the Caribbean is paying. So the Prime Minister of Jamaica, for instance...
Yeah, so we know that these salaries, I mean, we've done our homework, so I don't know that these salaries
you don't want me to share with the public.
Put parliamentarians and ministers in Jamaica higher than any other country in the Caribbean region.
You're trying to stop me from sharing.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so
I am saying to you, I'm familiar with it,
but
and I'm sharing it as well.
Are not. So let me go ahead very quickly. Prime Minister for Jamaica is going to be over 25 million. Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister is 13 million. Bahamas 13. Minister of Finance for Jamaica 21.7 million. Trinidad and Tobago 9 million. I'm quoting everything in Jamaican dollars. Bahamas 10.2 million. In Jamaica, Cabinet Minister will be at 20.2 million. Trinidad and Tobago 9 million. Bahamas 10.2. And an MP in Jamaica will be at 12.5. Trinidad and Tobago 3.8. Bahamas 4.3. How on earth do we justify these levels of salaries in a country that we're certainly doing far worse than Bahamas? And when you look at what is happening elsewhere in the region, there's absolutely no justification for this, surely.
Okay. So, again, first of all, Barbados, Trinidad, and Bahamas have not entered into a public sector restructuring. The way in which they have recovered from COVID has not put them in a position that they can add this amount to their wage bill to pay their public sectors. Jamaica is the only country in the region coming out of a pandemic that's been able to offer these levels of adjustments to its public service.
Why? Parliamentarians, given what we're seeing in terms of our level of development and our per capita income compared to those other countries.
Because of what we are going through, the experience that we have, Dionne, we are unable to attract and retain the talent that we need to run the public bureaucracy. That is going to change in salaries alone will not fix it, but it will go a long way towards addressing that problem.
Madam Speaker, the opposition takes no issue with what the minister has announced. We would urge the government to deal with the anomalies that exist for civil servants who have been granted increases and where there are discrepancies in their salaries, to urgently address those anomalies so that everyone can benefit from the new compensation package. But we take no issue.
So, Madam Speaker, I will take the member's contribution as a statement of support for these reforms by the opposition, which I am grateful for.
Isn't it true, though, that Julian Robinson is one of the party spokespersons who usually explains himself and his position extremely well? He's articulate.
Absolutely.
He's clear.
Absolutely. However,
no, but that's not a however.
He was taken by surprise. No, don't underestimate that point, though, that you're in the parliament and these figures are presented to you, and this is the first you're hearing them.
Julian Robinson is not an inexperienced parliamentarian.
No, he's not.
Right. He handles things on the fly all the time. He responds to government announcements all the time. The opposition takes no issue is a very specific, very positive statement, which the finance minister went on to say that he's taking as a show of support for the government, and there was no pushback from anybody. Isn't it reasonable for us to believe that what Mr. Robinson said is what he meant, especially since he has not said a word? You're the one out here spinning.
No, I'm not spinning at all. I'm trying to add context to what is being said. And I keep emphasizing the point that the party was not consulted in the process, therefore he did not know. What he heard would have been that these are in line with what a permanent secretary would get. So that process, that methodology, he wouldn't take any issue with the methodology.
You don't think this explanation insults our intelligence, Dr.
No,
Campbell?
it doesn't. No, it doesn't. What I'm saying to you, I'm in Parliament. I'm sitting down. The minister says these salaries are pegged to the salaries of the permanent secretaries. The person gets up to say, well, we don't take any issues with that. He goes on to say that we want you to address the anomalies. The party has completed that sentence or completed that point by going further to say, in light of these increases, we think that if you are going to give the political directorate this huge increase, then if you're only going to give a smaller increase to the majority of the persons in the public sector, then that to us is unconscionable. and it is unjust,
Well,
and that those persons are in need. Remember,
will the
we are talking about
MPs be giving up the increase or foregoing the increase?
those discussions are ongoing, and I want to put this point squarely on the table. If they do, it still does not mean that a teacher who is having difficulty sending our children to school and providing for them will be able to do so. They still need that matter addressed as to how they are compensated.
You're you're a member of the Electoral Commission, correct?
Yes.
Representing the
Yes.
opposition. I understand commission members are paid at the level of a judge, so your own salary will be moving from about 9 million to 20 million. You're giving that up?
I'm prepared to. I went to school to study medicine.
You see, the thing is, though, I pay a lot of attention to words.
Well,
so I am prepared to. It's not the
Yes.
same thing as I am going to.
Well, we're discussing the matter, and if that is the decision, I am prepared to and willing and ready to do so immediately.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Madam Speaker, the government of Jamaica has concluded on the first phase of the compensation restructuring with groups representing over 99% of several central government employees, or approximately 99,000 of approximately 100,000 central government employees. We embrace the principle, Madam Speaker, in this House that we should first settle with employees in the administrative and professional central government, well, public service, and then address salaries of parliamentarians. Public bodies, Madam Speaker, account for 10,000 employees, roughly speaking, and of the 140 public bodies, approximately 130 of them, or 93% by number, have already implemented a restructured public sector compensation. Those that remain include public bodies that perform commercial functions. And in some instances, public bodies of those that remain have received non-objection to implement, but the implementation is not yet finalized. The Ministry of Finance and Public Service is supporting these public bodies to finalize in the soonest possible time. The progress of which I have just summarized does not mean that there aren't issues to be dealt with. I want to use this opportunity to give the assurance that we will address outstanding matters and issues, though I do not propose to address them in my statement today, and ask that our discussion be limited to the subject of my statement, which is salaries for members of the legislature and the executive. Madam Speaker, the Jamaican Constitution establishes 3 co-equal branches of government: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Salaries for the judicial branch are determined by a process involving an independent commission as laid out in law since 1992, more than 30 years ago. And last week we tabled the recommendation of the 10th such commission and finalized that process for the current period for that branch of government. Adjustments to salaries for the legislature and executive were once determined by ad hoc committee, appointed from time to time by the Prime Minister of the day. But since 1989, more than 30 years ago, these salaries have, by practice, been determined by formulaic reference to the salary scale in the civil service. So the concept of linking the cabinet members' pay to that of the permanent secretary has existed unbroken for 50 years. Over time, Madam Speaker, while there have been squabbles and some disunity at times over parliamentary salaries in this House, this framework has endured. And Madam Speaker, we respect that endurance and therefore do not propose to change that framework. We propose to apply the existing framework for cabinet ministers to the new restructured central government compensation scale. Now, Madam Speaker, before I get to the precise level of salaries, let me say that the application of this framework will result in levels of salary increases that will attract attention, and rightly so. As such, as accountable officers, it's necessary to provide the context, the thought process, and the principles at work. Madam Speaker, while much has been ventilated in the public domain, it has escaped media attention that the public sector restructuring has resulted in significant movement in salary scales for a majority of persons who work in the public service. You don't increase public sector compensation by $100 billion without such an outcome, no matter what may dominate the headlines. And I need to provide some examples, Madam Speaker, since these have, though it's public, have not appeared in the public domain. Just by way of example, the salary scale for previously designated LMO TS6 officers who are ancillary supervisors and skilled artisans, i.e. certified and experienced mechanics and plumbers and electricians who work in maintenance departments in the public service, those salaries have moved from, the scale has moved from $13,700 to $15,500 a week, effective April 1st, 2021, to $47,656 to $64,000 per week, effective April 1st, 2023, an increase of 247% to 313% in the salary scale over this period. This corresponding salary scale over the same period for the LMO TS5 was between 200% and 360%. For the LMO TS4, between 178 and 230%. For the LMO TS3, between 80% and 120%. For the LMO TS2, from 60% to 100%. At the starting level of the previous LMO scale, the salary scales for the LMO TS1, who are our groundsmen and watchmen and entry-level ancillary workers in the public service, has moved from $9,781 to $11,000 a week to $16,400 to $22,000 per week as at April 1st, 2023, and that salary scale movement reflects 68% to 100%. Madam Speaker, there are approximately 6,000 Jamaicans in the categories of previously designated LMO TS1 to TS6 officers. Madam Speaker, the context of what we're doing is a restructured public sector compensation in which compensation scales have been stretched to address the need to attract and retain talent at all levels to run the public bureaucracy, both at administrative levels and today at the political levels. The political directorate is a policy-making arm of government that sits at the top of the administrative arm of government. Permanent secretaries who have administrative control over their ministries are responsible for executing the policy directions and ensuring the delivery of the policy outcomes that come from the political directorate. Though roles differ, it's a continuous chain from the political directorate to the public sector officers. The political directorate provides strategic direction for the public sector and is therefore part of the delivery of public services through the Jamaican public sector. From the analysis conducted by Ernst & Young, who were consultants to the government on the public sector restructuring, the senior levels in the public sector were the furthest away from market. This is consistent with anecdotal evidence and has been a significant problem that has cost the country. Madam Speaker, if the public sector is unable to retain its leadership or to attract the most appropriate, experienced, and qualified leadership, the entire organization is put in jeopardy. We have to be able to attract new blood into the leadership levels of the public sector, to infuse new ways of thinking, new ideas for the organization's own growth and development. And we also need to attract persons to leadership, whether those persons are internal to the organization. For internal persons, outside of their own ambitions, they need to see that stepping up to leadership is worthwhile. And for the external prospects, they too need to see that making a transition is worthwhile to step into leadership in public sector organizations. Persons need to be encouraged in making career moves into public sector leadership, central government, public bodies, the political directorate, without putting their economic security at total risk. As such, Madam Speaker, there has been significant adjustment to the salary scales for the leadership across the public sector. And bear with me while I just give a few examples. and I've brought some of the salary scales to share. In the police force, the salary scale for the deputy commissioner, before you consider other things, has moved from 9 million to 10.8 million to 14 million to 17 million, effective April 1, 2023. The salary scale for the superintendent was 5.6 million to 6.7 million. And for 2023, that's now 9.5 million to 11.6 million. For the deputy superintendent, who used to be at 3.3 million to 4 million, that's now at 6.2 million to 7.5 million. For the legal profession in the public service, Madam Speaker, the legal officer 6 has moved from 4.9 to 5.9 million, if you can just bear those numbers, as at April 2021, to 10.1 to 13.6 million. 4.9 to 5.9 to 10.1 to 13.6. The legal officer 5 has moved from 4.1 to 4.8 to 10.1 to 13.6 million. In the nursing profession, the salary scale in the leadership, Madam Speaker, has moved from 3.5 to 4.2, which is what it was in 2021. 3.5 million to 4.2 million to 9.25 million to 10.995 million as at April 2023, Madam Speaker. For the second layer in the nursing profession, not just the leadership, it was 3 million to 3.6, and it's now moved to 8.25 million to 9.8 million as at April 2023. For medical doctors, and here I talk about not the consultants who earn much more than the other doctors. They used to be called junior doctors, we just call them doctors today. The salaries before this reform at the highest level of the medical doctor profession, the salaries, were 3 million to 3.6 million in 2021, and we have moved those now to 8.2 million to 9.8 million. The salary scale for medical doctors at the MO2 level were 2.6 million to 3.1 million, and they have moved to 7.3 million to 8.7 million. The salary scale at the MO1 level was 2.2 million to 2.7 million. That's moved to 6.3 to 7.5 million. Madam Speaker, it's necessary because the media hasn't really done it for us, even though the information is public. And I just think in coming to address salaries that we know will gather headlines in the public domain, it is necessary to put out information, Madam Speaker, where we have addressed salaries in the leadership levels of the public sector. And just to continue, Madam Speaker, the salary scale in the teaching profession, Madam Speaker, and I'll spend a little more time on this one, for principals of tertiary colleges, salaries were 4.3 million to 4.9 million, and those have moved to 10.4 million to $13 million, Madam Speaker, for 2023. The salaries for principals of the larger secondary schools used to be 2.9 million to 3.4 million, and those salaries are now 8.5 million to $10.9 million, Madam Speaker. The salary scale for principals of the smallest secondary schools used to be 2.2 million to 2.6 million in April as at April 2021. Those as at April 2023 are now 5.6 to 7.2 million dollars. So 2.2 to 2.6 moved to 5.6 to 7.2. Madam Speaker, the salary scale for secondary school vice principals has moved from 2.1 million to 2.4 million as at April 1st, 2021, and I will provide all this information. I don't want to circulate it now because it will just distract a little bit. But I think members of this House need to be armed with all of this information. Okay? From vice principals from 2.1 to 2.4 million to 4.6 million to $5.8 million as at April 2023. For the larger, and it doesn't stop at the secondary schools, for the largest primary schools, salaries have moved from 2.4 million to 2.6 million as at April 1st, 2021 to 7 million to 8.9 million as at April 1st, 2023. Madam Speaker, salary scales for principals at the smallest primary schools, which used to be 1.7 million to 2 million as at April 1st, 2021, are now 5.6 million to 7.2 million as at April 2023. For the Master Teacher 1, salaries used to be 1.6 to 1.86 million, and now, Madam Speaker, as at 2021, and now as at 2023, they're 4 million to 5.1 million dollars at April 2023. And Madam Speaker, this is just a small sample, just sampling the leadership in the public service. I could go to the leadership in all areas: probation officers, aftercare officers, medical records clerks, etc. Across the public service, Madam Speaker, we have, among other things, moved the leadership of the public service up in compensation because of the findings of the market survey by Ernst & Young, that they were furthest away from market. And out of anecdotal experience, the dire problem we are having in the public service with attracting and retaining the kind of leadership that we need. And I set this out, Madam Speaker, just to set facts out. And I'm glad that there's no banging of desks of applause, because the purpose is not to seek applause, Madam Speaker, but for the public to be aware. These salaries are up, have been up on the Ministry of Finance website for the past 6 weeks. There's been no article on any of them, Madam Speaker, and I just think that the context needs to be provided for the changes that we will be announcing today. So, Madam Speaker, in addition to all of those leadership levels, at the permanent secretary level, salary and Madam Speaker, allowances have featured as a part of compensation before. Those would, in the scale of numbers I've just described, they pale in significance to the movements that I've just described. For the leadership in the civil service, Madam Speaker, the permanent secretary salary scale moved from 7.4 to 9.26 million as at April 2021 to 15.8 million to 21.2 million as at April 2023. Now, members of this House who are paying attention will immediately say, wait, permanent secretaries used to make 7.4 to 9.2. Cabinet ministers didn't make that. And the paradigm was $52 above. Well, what happened, Madam Speaker, is that I believe when permanent secretaries were moved away from chief technical directors, they used to be paid at the same. Somehow the corresponding adjustment for ministers did not happen. Okay? But the spirit has always been $52 more than the permanent secretary. Madam Speaker, the background and context is critically important. And as I mentioned, as a country, just repeating myself, if we're to achieve our development objectives after years of macroeconomic stability, the path ahead will require that we attract new blood into the leadership levels of the public sector and to infuse new ways of thinking, new ideas for the organization's own growth and development. And we need to be able to attract persons, Madam Speaker, from within the public service to aspire for leadership as well. For internal persons, again, outside of their own ambitions, they need to see that stepping up is worthwhile. And for external prospects, they need to see that making a transition, Madam Speaker, will not result in them living in circumstances that they would find difficult to make ends meet. So, Madam Speaker, we have made these adjustments across the entire leadership level of the administrative public sector and propose to do so for the political directorate as well. As such, Madam Speaker, consistent with the Fletcher framework of 1989, Madam Speaker, the Cabinet has affirmed and approved the following for salaries of the National Political Directorate effective April 1st, 2022, and that has provided a framework. That the Cabinet Minister is paid at $52 higher than the maximum of the permanent secretary salary scale, which has been the framework for the past 37 years. That, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance is paid at 7.5% above the level of the Cabinet Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister at 12.5% above the level of the Cabinet Minister, and the Prime Minister at 25% above the level of the cabinet minister for the difference in levels of complexity, risk, and responsibilities. For the Minister of State to be compensated at levels of 80% of the cabinet minister, the Speaker of the House to be at the same level, to continue to be at the same level as the cabinet minister, the Parliamentary Secretary at 75% of the cabinet minister, the Leader of the Opposition at the same level as the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Deputy Speaker at 75% of the cabinet minister, and the Member of Parliament at 62% of the cabinet minister. Madam Speaker, before itemizing the dollar amounts that arise from this framework, and I want again to stress that this framework is the same framework that has been in place since 1989, but it's important to note, Madam Speaker, that whereas at the current time and for the past 30 years, the Prime Minister earns and has earned 33% above the Cabinet Minister, and the Deputy Prime Minister earns and has earned 16.5% more than the Cabinet Minister, and the Minister of Finance has earned and earns 8% more than the Cabinet Minister. We are revising those compensation bands downward to 25%, 12.5%, and 7.5% respectively above the salary level of the Cabinet Minister for the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, this framework implies the following salaries for members of the public political directorate, and it's all here for members to take with them. And bear with me because I have to read a number of numbers. Madam Speaker, for the Cabinet Minister, payment at $52 above the level of the Permanent Secretary will result in a salary as at April 1st, 2022 of $17.866 million, with respect to April 1st, 2023, $20.2 million, and with respect to April 1st, 2024, $22.87 million. Madam Speaker, for the Minister of Finance, with respect to April 1st, 2022, and I think you'd want me to read them all out, Madam Speaker. April 1st, 2022, $19.2 million. For April 1st, 2023, $21.7 million. For April 1st, 2024, $24.6 million. I'm rounding up to the nearest 100,000. For the Deputy Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, $20.1 million as at April 1st, 2022, $22.7 million as at April 1st, 2023, and $25.7 million as at April 1st, 2024. For the Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, salary of $22.3 million as at April 1st, 2022, $25.3 million at April 1st, 2023, and salary of $28.6 million as at April 1st, 2024. Madam Speaker, for the Minister of State, who is at 80% of the Cabinet Minister, a salary of $14.3 million as at April 1st, 2022, $16.2 million as April 1st, 2023, and $18.3 million as at April 1st, 2024. Madam Speaker, for the Speaker of the House to be compensated at the level of the Cabinet Minister, which I just read. For the Parliamentary Secretary, who was benchmarked, Madam Speaker, at 75% of the Cabinet Minister, the level would be $13.4 million for April 1st, 2022, $15.2 million for April 1st, 2023, and $17.2 million effective April 1st, 2024. Madam Speaker, for the Leader of the Opposition, who's compensated at the same level as the Deputy Prime Minister, which I read earlier and will not repeat. For the Deputy Speaker, Madam Speaker, compensated at the same level, at 75% of the Cabinet member, which is the same level as the Parliamentary Secretary. I won't repeat that. And then for the Member of Parliament, Madam Speaker, who's compensated at the level of 62% of the Cabinet Minister, salary for April 1st, 2022 of $11.1 million, April 1st, 2023, $12.5 million, and April 1st, 2024, $14.2 million. Madam Speaker, previous allowances enjoyed by members of the Political Directorate, including housing and telephone allowance, will be discontinued effective April 1st, 2022. Madam Speaker, I find it necessary to emphasize that the judiciary continues to be the highest paid branch of government, which has been and should always be, in my opinion, I believe the opinion of the government, and the opinion of the government, the case, and for good reason. The order passed last week addressed judicial salaries, which is the requirement. However, by law, for members of the judiciary, there are other elements of compensation consistent with the law, which were recommended by the Independent Commission and were accepted by the government. These were not the subject of an order and did not need to be, but would have been embedded in the Independent Commission's report tabled in Parliament, but were not picked up in the media. When these cash emoluments are factored in, the emoluments for members of the judicial branch of government, Madam Speaker, would be the Chief Justice at the total emoluments, 31.2 million for April 1st, 2022, and 34.8 million for April 1st, 2023. All the way down, Madam Speaker, the President of the Court of Appeal, 28.9 million and 32.2 million, respectively. The Appeal Court Judge, 27 million and 28.7 million, respectively. And the Senior Punitive Judge, 24 million and 26.8 million for April 1st, 2022 and April 1st, 2023. And the Punitive Judge at 23 million and 25.7 million for 2022 and 2023, respectively. Madam Speaker, at the level of local government, similar principles apply. Currently, compensation for the Mayor of Kingston and St. Andrew is set at 3% above the minimum salary scale of the Chief Executive Officer of the Kingston and St. Andrew municipality. The other positions in local government, Madam Speaker, are related to that of the Mayor of Kingston and St. Andrew. And currently, those benchmarks are the Mayor of Kingston at 3% more than the CEO of the Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation, the Mayor of Montego Bay at 91% of the Mayor of the KSA region, the Mayor of other parish capitals at 86% of the KSA Mayor, the Mayor of Portmore at 86% of the KSA Mayor, the Deputy Mayor of the KSA at 61% of the KSA Mayor, and the Deputy Mayor of Montego Bay, 55% of the Mayor of KSA, the Deputy Mayor of other parishes, 52% of the Mayor of KSA, and Deputy Mayor of Portmore at 52% of the KSA Mayor, and councillors at 44% of the Mayor of the KSA. In keeping with the goal of simplicity, Madam Speaker, the relationship between the pay of the Mayor of the Kingston and St. Andrew municipality and that of the CEO of the Kingston and St. Andrew municipality will be established at $52 above the minimum of the scale of that CEO, instead of the percentage relationship that I just described at 3%. And, Madam Speaker, from the Deputy Mayor to Councillor, the percentage benchmarks are being adjusted, Madam Speaker. In the case of the, it went from sort of 86% at the Mayor of Portmore and the Mayor of parish capitals down to 61% of the Deputy Mayor. And it would just been adjusted upward, Madam Speaker, instead of 61% for the Deputy Mayor to 75%, and instead of 55% for the Deputy Mayor of Montego Bay to 70%, and from 52% for the Deputy Mayor for other parishes to 65%, and for councillors, instead of being at 44% of the Mayor of KSA, to be at 50% of the Mayor of the Kingston and St. Andrew municipality. Madam Speaker, this framework implies the following salaries for members of the Political Directorate who serve at the local level. For the Mayor of Kingston, Madam Speaker, who is currently on a salary of $3.8 million, that will move, Madam Speaker, effective April 1st, 2022 to $8.9 million, for April 1st, 2023 to $10.1 million, and for April 1st, 2024 to $11.4 million. For the Mayor of Montego Bay, the salary of $3.4 million will move to $8.1 million for 2022 9.2 million for 2023, and 10.4 million for April 1st, 2024. The mayors for other parish capitals who are currently on 3.3 million, Madam Speaker, will move to 7.7 million, 8.7 million, and 9.9 million for April 1st, 2022, April 1st, 2023, and April 1st, 2024, respectively. And that will also be the salary for the mayor of Portmore. For the deputy mayor of Kingston, Madam Speaker, who is a salary of 2.3 million, that will move to 6.7 million, 7.6 million, and 8.6 million for April 1st, 2023, for April 1st, 2022, 2023, and 2024. Madam Speaker, for the deputy mayor of Montego Bay, who is on a salary of $2 million, that will move to 6.2 million, 7 million, and 8 million for April 1st, 2022, 2023, and 2024. And for the deputy mayors of other parish capitals who currently earn 1.99 million, Madam Speaker, that will move to 5.8 million, 6.6 million, and 7.4 million for the years April 1st, 2022, April 1st, 2023, and April 1st, 2024, respectively. And for the parish council, Madam Speaker, who currently, effective April 1st, 2021, was on a salary of 1.67 million, Madam Speaker, which I think everyone in this House would absolutely agree is woefully, woefully inadequate for the job that they do, Madam Speaker. That has been moved to 4.5 million effective April 1st, 2022 by virtue of the benchmark, 5 million for April 1st, 2023, and $5.7 million for April 1st, 2024. Now, Madam Speaker, these are consequent upon the movement in the compensation for the CEO of the Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation, who was moved from a salary level of approximately $4 million to a salary range of $8.9 to $8.9 million April 1st, 2022, 10 million April 1st, 2023, and 11.4 million 2024. Madam Speaker, as with members of the political directorate, previous allowances enjoyed by members of the political directorate, the non-reimbursable allowances, i.e. telephone allowance and those other fixed allowances, the reimbursable ones continue, those, Madam Speaker, will be discontinued. Now, Madam Speaker, these salary adjustments for the political directorate at the local and national levels across the 3 years of implementation, this is not for 1 year, we're talking the 3 years, for 2022-23, for 2023-24, and for 24-25 will cost a total of $1.7 billion over the 3-year period. Madam Speaker, after a tumultuous macroeconomic period lasting several decades, and after fiscal reform over the past decade, we have sought to establish a simplified, transparent, and market-informed public sector compensation system that can allow us to attract and retain the talent we need to run the public bureaucracy. The salaries announced here today for members of the executive and legislature form part of that effort. We have continued to align salaries for these critically important functions with corresponding benchmarks in the administrative public sector, as has been the case over at least 50 years, Madam Speaker, and this alignment will result in significant changes. Madam Speaker, it was bold of the government to undertake this public sector compensation reform in one go across all arms of government, and it is also bold to implement these changes that I've announced today at this time. Madam Speaker, we believe these changes to be in the best long-term interest of Jamaica. It is not about who occupies these positions today. It is about the quality that Jamaica will be able to attract and retain in positions of political leadership at all levels, tomorrow and beyond. This compensation restructure, Madam Speaker, is an investment in our future. We hope that Madam Speaker, that more qualified and experienced Jamaicans will find it attractive and financially feasible to offer themselves to serve their country through the administrative public service or through the political directorate. In this way, Madam Speaker, Jamaica is leading the Caribbean. There's no other Caribbean country that's implemented a public sector restructuring of the kind that we have, that has moved compensation levels in the way that we have, that has sought to remunerate the leadership in the public service across all branches, including the political directorate, in the way that we have. But then again, Madam Speaker, we also stand alone, or not stand alone, but we stand, Madam Speaker, with a few who have implemented the kinds of fiscal reforms that we have over as long a period. Madam Speaker, when we invest in our future in this way, in a manner that seeks to attract experienced and qualified persons to enter public service leadership in the administrative, professional, and political branches, Jamaica wins. And that is what this reform is about, Jamaica winning. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Madam Speaker, the opposition takes no issue with what the minister has announced. We would urge the government to deal with the anomalies that exist for civil servants who have been granted increases and where there are discrepancies in their salaries, to urgently address those anomalies so that everyone can benefit from the new compensation package. But we take no issue. I would ask one question. In relation to retired parliamentarians who are pensioners, is there any indexation between their pension and these new salary levels?
With respect to the point on addressing anomalies, Madam Speaker, this House and the country at large can rest assured that the Ministry of Finance and Public Service and the Transformation Implementation Unit are working overtime to address any anomalies that arise. The anomaly to the individual is it's as if the world is coming down because it's their particular experience. We can't afford to look at it from the point of view of 100,000. For that individual, that is all that matters in the world. And as a result, Madam Speaker, we take each and every one of the cases brought before us absolutely seriously. We would just want there to be an understanding that we have taken on the entire public service at one time. And there's no precedent that we have been able to find of a country that has done that. We have chosen to do it, Madam Speaker, because of the realities in our country, that if we had started the reform with one group and then proposed to do another group in a couple of years and another group in a couple of years, Madam Speaker, it would not be credible because we have tried that in the past. In the past, we started with one group that brought them to 80% of market. And all know the other groups were not adjusted, which is why, Madam Speaker, this was the only way for Jamaica to do it, to take on the entire thing at once. But the corollary of it, Madam Speaker, is that in taking on the entire thing at once, while for 80% or more of persons, I would say, a higher number, maybe even 90%, things are working, there are no doubt anomalies that we have to address, and we give our commitment to do so. If you want to understand the administrative challenges in the public service, you put in a new compensation system and you push it through. The Ministry of Finance is responsible for the pay policy and for reaching agreement with public sector unions and for providing the resources for the salaries to be paid. But salaries in the public service, Madam Speaker, the administration is very fragmented. They're implemented at a local level, and each ministry, department, and agency is responsible for their own implementation. For example, it is Parliament that will implement the new salaries for members of the executive and the legislature, not the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Similarly, each ministry and department and agency implements their segment of it, not the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. For the vast majority of the public service, we have had that implementation go through without issue. You'll recall in December we had some issues in the health sector, but those delays were 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And Madam Speaker, we have seen something like that in the education sector, Madam Speaker, which reflects, as the Minister will tell you, the reforms that we're going to need to implement in the administration of, I dare say, I have to say it, the administration of education, not teachers, but the administration of education, including the financial administration, Madam Speaker. This is clear for everyone to see. We implemented a complex reform across many ministries, departments, and agencies. We didn't have any hitches in the police. Didn't have any hitches in the civil service. The hitch in the health sector was just a few days, etc., etc. But when it comes to the education sector, the government of Jamaica, and can't escape responsibility because it's one government, the government of Jamaica has had these challenges. And the challenges don't arise, Madam Speaker, with the Ministry of Finance. The problems have arisen, Madam Speaker, in the calculations and administrations done at the local level. And Madam Speaker, the question was asked about former members of the House and whether they are indexed or will benefit from these changes. But Madam Speaker, members of the political directorate would not have been alone in that experience. That would have been the common experience of members of the public service. As such, we could not adjust levels for retired members of Parliament, i.e. those who retired prior to April 1st, 2022. Remember, these salaries are effective April 1st, 2022 and April 1st, 2023. For those who retired prior to April 1st, 2022, we could no more adjust their levels of financial flows than we could for members of the public service who retired 1st to April 1st, 2022. It's a reality, Madam Speaker, that breaks my heart. Breaks my heart. And I'm sure it does for everyone here. But those are our realities. We have to be principled, and our principles have to apply equally. And it would not be financially affordable to adjust for all retired members of the public service in the same way, Madam Speaker. Therefore, we can't for members of the House. But